Do any of you trust Harrisburg with your money? I surely don't. So what do? Reduce property taxes immediately by 50%. Fix the reassessment process, tie it to property sales, rather than allow it to be politicized every 10 or 15 years with these arbitrary formulas that some go down, some go up, and some stay the same. On a county-wide level, have sales tax and income tax possibilities for those school districts in that county. You can't do it in a municipality by district, because what you're doing is you're setting up an unfair advantage for folks living in Hollidaysburg maybe versus folks living in Altoona. And that will hurt business. You do it on a county level, yes, there's bleed over to some neighboring counties, but there's equalization boards that fix that. You do it on that county level, and it's the fairest way to prevent money from being misspent and to ensure that each of us are paying our fair share without burdening people solely on property tax purposes. Thank you.
Would anyone mind telling me the definition of impossible? Because I don't know that I really know the definition of that word. So many of the things that I've seen and I've done over the course of my life were impossible. Pretty impossible for me to even be here right now. And fortunately, thanks to the efforts of many people, here I am. So I think if something is worthwhile and important and beneficial and right and just, then we should ignore the fact that it's impossible and work toward doing it. I like initiative. Okay, half is better than nothing, but boy, the process, the problem with the property tax, there's too much of it. I mean, how much of our personal property do we really own? I mean, can we own 100% of our personal property? I'd really like that to be the case. But what to do about it? Well, I like the idea of sales taxes on a county level. The great idea about that, or the great part of that about that, is that allows even counties to be competitive with one another. Let's say County A needs 2% sales tax, but County B only needs 1.5%. Or they can run their schools efficiently enough that maybe they can do it on a 1% sales tax. Wouldn't that give an interesting incentive for schools to keep their costs where they should be and give them an opportunity to compete across the board? So yes, I think we can abolish the property tax, and I think we should. Thank you.
I'm going to apologize ahead of time, but did you notice how difficult it was for Judy to answer that question? Because she's the one that has been there and had to deal with this issue in Harrisburg, because in Harrisburg, they do not want to talk about having to try and figure out a way to deal with property tax. Because you've heard the saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Everybody in Harrisburg wants to get rid of property tax. We're all for it, right? But when you come up with a proposal to say this is how we're going to do it, it invariably includes the taxation of unearned income on seniors. How many seniors can afford to have their pensions taxed or their Social Security taxed? It's a deal breaker. So when you talk about eliminating property tax, you have to accept that there are just some things that are not going to be possible. One of the things that when I think back to the Casey plan, it didn't work because it involved taxing seniors' pensions. If you think back to Act 50, Governor Rendell said, no, we have a better idea. We're going to add slot machines and horse tracks. We need to try and support horse racing in the state of Pennsylvania. $2.6 billion over the last 10 years has been produced by those slot machines to help make horse racing owners rich. While our property tax continues to go up, this state of Pennsylvania has got it all wrong. We need leadership in Harrisburg that's going to recognize how to solve the problem, and somebody's going to have to get tough on this decision. Until we get serious about property tax, it's never going to happen, and you're going to hear answers like that just really don't make any sense. So thank you.
Since you were mentioned by name in that answer, do you wish a 30-second response?
No, that's fine.
Our next question, we'll start with Dan Kiss. The question is, how do you balance the desire and need to ensure that your region gets a fair share of the monies that are available to your region in the form of grants, federal funds, etc., with the need to reduce and control government spending and reduce the size of both the state and federal government and budgets. You want me to read the question again? How do you balance the desire and need to ensure that your region gets a fair share of the monies that are available in the form of grants, federal funds, etc., with the need to reduce government spending and reduce the size of both the state and federal governments? Is that sufficient?
Close enough. I think we can handle it. Well, I wish I could answer the federal level, because unfortunately I'm not asking to go to Congress, and I'm not going down there to try to fight for federal money for folks. So as much as I wish I could do something about the federal government and their insane amounts of spending, I don't have a horse in that fight. So I'll talk about the state level. There is state money available, and generally speaking, it doesn't come here. Where does it go? It goes to Philadelphia, it goes to Pittsburgh. Why? I'm not sure. There's lots of folks who are in office right now that you can ask that question to, and ask them why they haven't fought for money to come back to central Pennsylvania. I'd like an answer. I think a lot of our business owners around here would like an answer. I think our fire departments, our police departments would like an answer. And I think that question does need answered. That has to be balanced, though, with reducing overall our state budget. It does need reduced, and it should be reduced 10% starting immediately. Each department should have to prove, as I said earlier, on a zero budget basis, where and how they're spending our money. If there's money left over after that point, okay, let's talk about going to worthy projects and not pet projects to keep people elected. One of the quickest ways to fix that is term limits. You do that, it's a lot harder for that money to get passed around to special pet projects where people have been there for 20 or 30 years. Number two, get money out of politics. Take away the special interest money, and all of a sudden there's a lot less incentive for that money to go to the wrong places. If you start with those two things, then we have a chance of getting money back here on a fair basis while still reducing our government budget. Thank you. Chris Creek?
So do I talk about what I'd like to see, or do I talk about what we're likely to get accomplished? Very tough question. Well, first of all, somebody had mentioned about us getting our fair share of the pie, getting our piece of the pie. And primarily, I'm kind of opposed to that whole idea of our piece of the pie, because if you bake a pie, I think you should get to keep your pie. And I'm going to do what I can to make sure that we reduce taxes to the point where we can keep more of our pie here. But in terms of something that's going to be very realistic, if we have a need for money to be going into the local governments, why in the world would we pass that up? I mean, if we had something going on in a borough, would we send that money to the county just so they could send a little bit of it back? I mean, every area, every piece of administration that's added to that takes money away from what's in there. I think that the taxes should be based primarily in the local levels. Now, I understand, we're not talking about what's possible. I'm talking about what I'd really like to see. I would like to see weaker central governments, stronger local governments, funding our local governments first before we worry about what goes to Harrisburg and what goes to the federal. And honestly, there's really no reason that we couldn't change our system to that. We've got a state system that's collecting taxes. If they're not willing to reduce the amount of taxes, could we initiate something where the counties automatically get a certain portion of that, and then they decide? Who knows what programs we need? The people in Harrisburg, people in Washington, or the people in our local communities? These are the people that are closest to the problems and the needs in the communities, and these are the people that should make those decisions. Thanks.
Well, I'm going to stick to the state part of this conversation, and one of the programs that's one of the hottest topics in economic development in Harrisburg right now is the Pennsylvania Industrial Development Authority. And this is a program that was set up as a loan program back in the 50s, and basically was set up as a job creation arm for economic development. Right now, though, the biggest part of that discussion is that they want to try and use that money to be able to reuse and also to be able to retain. In the state of Pennsylvania, we're losing people to other states because we're not able to keep them here for the jobs. So being able to use that as a loan program, not a grant program, but that loan program has become competitive with banks. It used to be lower than banks. And as it became competitive with banks, it then took away its effectiveness. So they're trying to return it to a rate on a loan that allows for businesses to be able to use it for the purposes that we can retain employees, but we can also be able to reuse locations where businesses are. We can use it to retool. We can use it to be able to help buy new equipment. And so with that thought in mind, I would also just like to say that let's not be naive. In Harrisburg, nobody's going to Harrisburg, unfortunately, enough people to go there to treat the state as the most important aspect. They're going there to fight for their districts first. And unfortunately, if you don't go down to fight for your district, you're not going to get what you want to come back to the people in your district. So let's not be naive about this. We need to make sure that we're fighting for our districts when we go to Harrisburg. Thank you.
I believe we do need to reduce our spending. I'm a big fan of the zero-based budgeting as well. But as long as there's grant money available, I'm going for it, and I have. Each year, our fire departments get grant money, and we help them with letters of support, water and sewer projects. Hollidaysburg had a sewer project, and we were able to help get funds. Recreational trails, we've been working actively to get grants for some of the trails that we all know and love. I've worked with ABCD to help them with the silk mill, the old Warnaco building. There was a grant out there, just money sitting out there, and ABCD was able to check off all the boxes, and they qualified immediately for a grant that will help bring jobs to the area. Nason Hospital, I was able to help get them $500,000 to update their operating rooms and put in a cath lab and make them competitive with the other hospitals in the area. So I am a big proponent. If the money is there, I am going to fight for it, and I'm going to bring it back. Thank you.
Our next question, and we'll be leading off with Chris Creek. Are you in favor of school vouchers, school choice here in Pennsylvania to ensure that parents have the primary role in determining how and where to educate their children?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm wondering if I need to say anything else. Why in the world do our school funds not follow our primary and secondary students the way student loans would follow our college students? If I think that I've got a better opportunity at Penn State University rather than Clarion University, or if I want the experience of some other school rather than what's in my backyard, why can't I as a parent or as a student decide what opportunities that I have available? That it puts our schools in competition. Sure. Competition sharpens us. Jim, does competition sharpen a fellow?
You better believe it.
It does, absolutely it does. And it's not a bad thing. It helps us to be the best version of who we can be. And I have faith in our teachers in our schools. I think they can do a fantastic job, and I think they can hold their own. Matter of fact, we've got a lot of great districts here in the district. But why in the world would we not allow parents to utilize the funds in the best way that they see fit for their child? Because there is no one size fits all. Thanks.
Senate Bill 2 has been getting a lot of attention these days when it comes to the vouchers, or if you want to call them savings accounts, and I am in favor of the opportunity for anybody to get an education for their child however they choose to do so. But I am also not open to just saying, let's just do that, without making sure that those folks who cannot afford, because of time, because of professional commitments, that they need to be able to continue to send their children to public schools, that we are going to take the money away from public schools because we have to make sure that those people also have an opportunity at a good education. So I'm open to the conversation about vouchers. I'm also open to the conversation about savings accounts. The thing that happens when it comes to the charters and cybers, though, however, is that there's not a level playing field. Public schools are held to a high standard. They have to meet requirements. And if they don't meet those requirements, bad things happen. But until we make sure that charter schools, cyber schools, and anybody else that's going to use any other choice for their education, that there's either a level playing field by lowering the standards in our public schools, or making sure that we're raising the standards for other ways of education, that they're making sure it's a level playing field for all, and that everybody's getting the kind of education that they deserve in Pennsylvania. We want to deliver that kind of education because we want them to be successful, to be able to go on and be successful in their professional lives. So, thank you very much.
I support our public school teachers. I truly do. They have a hard job, and it's not an easy job these days, given all the issues our students are facing. But I also believe that parents should be able to choose what's best for their student. I was at a rally for the EITC program yesterday, and it was really so wonderful. You had Christian schools, Jewish schools, Catholic schools, and these kids are thriving, and it's where their parents want them to be. And I have introduced a bill that would allow for a scholarship program or an educational savings account for students with disabilities, special education students that would give parents an option. Sometimes parents have come to me and they say their children aren't doing well, their special needs children are not doing well, but they don't have options. And also this would apply to a gifted student. I have found with friends' children that sometimes you have a student that's so bright, you don't quite know what to do with them. And putting them in the box of public education isn't what's best for them. So I'm a firm believer in the EITC programs and choice for parents. Thank you.
The ultimate educator of any child is their parents. They're the ones who day in and day out are reaffirming and reteaching what that child learns, whether it be morals, manners, how to live, or what they learned in school that day. So parents should have that choice. Parents should have that say. Now, when someone comes to me for legal advice, I say, you should see a lawyer. If I'm sick, I go see a doctor. If we want our schools to be competitive, let our teachers teach. Reduce these crazy programs that come from the state and federal level. And I'm talking about Common Core and No Child Left Behind. Give our local schools the ability to decide how to run the local schools again and not tie all of this money that they get in funding to a test the teachers teach to. Let teachers teach, let them do their jobs. And let our school boards be the ones who decide how our districts are going to work. Give that local control back, remove from the state level, and you'll have competitive districts again. And we won't have this concern of, well, this district's better, this district's better, because the local school district will do the job. Let parents make those choices. Let them move to the best district they want to, that's fine. Move their kids as they need, but make schools more competitive through getting rid of the standardized federal and state level programs and let teachers teach.
The next question will be from Jim Gregory. What is your position on term limits for all legislative positions, and what is your position on reducing the size of the legislature?
This is one of the first things that I thought of when I decided to run for office. Back in May of last year, I watched a video, and the video was of Senator Eichelberger talking in 2007 about the importance of term limits and how it would change the landscape of government in Pennsylvania. And I told people back several months ago when we actually had our first event at the Altoona Grand. That video inspired me. It was one of the things that made me decide to run for office, because I believed that if we could get term limits through the state of Pennsylvania with a limited constitutional convention, it would change the landscape of government in Pennsylvania forever. And I asked for Senator Eichelberger to stay in office and not run for Congress so he could be a delegate at one of those conventions, and that he could see that through, and it would have cemented his legacy forever when it comes to the importance of term limits. But of course, that's not happening. So for term limits for me, I promised that I would run for no more than 5, which means up to 5. But when it comes to, and the other part was the limited size of the legislature. So I don't want to see our area have any less voice when it comes to the legislature, that we are already more beholden to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. If we are going to shrink the size of the legislature, and it's the way that we can save money in the state of Pennsylvania, I'm all for it. I will listen and I will talk about that. But in my final 10 seconds, I'm going to promise you that when it comes to the representation of this district, I'm not going to give up and say that the size of the legislature is the most important thing. It's representing you full-time as your state representative in Harrisburg. Thank you.
Judy Ward.
Yes, I also believe in term limits. I signed on to a bill actually this week that would be a 12-year term limit. So that would be 6 terms in the House, 3 terms in the Senate. And I believe in that. I believe in that. I also have been a yes vote for decreasing the size of the legislature. We have a proposal that would take it from 203 House members down to 151. That is a double-edged sword, because people are used to great access with their state representatives, but I think it would be helpful to take the size of the legislature down. I personally would be a fan of the limited constitutional convention and allow the people to decide how this should best be handled, and then vote on the ballot and allow people to vote and give them a say. So thank you.
Dan Kiss.
In addition to being in favor of term limits, I've actually said I will have term limits, and that I will only run for 2 terms. Why? It destroys the ability of big government and the bureaucracy. We need more of that. That's what our founders intended, was for citizen legislatures, not legislature citizens. So that's why I believe in term limits. That's why I have pledged to only run 2 terms. As for the size of government, we've heard 2 different arguments. We need to reduce it, and well, we need to think about it because we don't want to lose our ability to have a voice. So you know what? If you want to do it and get both ways, go to 1 representative from each county. Kind of how we did in the federal government when we did the Connecticut Compromise. That way there, Philadelphia doesn't get any more control. They have 1 representative. Pittsburgh doesn't get any more control. They have 1 representative. The same as we'd have here in Blair, the same we'd have here anywhere else. So if you want to have it both ways, do it that way, so that that voice still counts. And you know what? Yep, that's going to be 4 or 5 million people in Philadelphia. Maybe that's not quote-unquote fair. But you know what? That makes it fair for us, so we don't lose our voice and we don't lose our say. So if you're going to do it the right way and do it the whole way, and not just cut some numbers so we lose our voices here. Thank you.
My position on term limits is pretty clear. Anybody who's ever heard me speak has heard me say those words. Although I will admit that I've softened on term limits a little bit. I used to think we needed to throw them out after 6 months. And I think we could probably let people go for 10, 12 years. And that was due to a conversation I had with a friend of mine. He said, you know, he says, I don't want to just put a revolving door in and throw people out. He says, what we want to do is make sure that if we have a problem there, it doesn't last forever. And I said, okay, you know, maybe 10 years, maybe 12 years, but I've limited myself to 3 terms. And I think that's a reasonable amount of time to get something done, at least in the private sector it is. It seems very difficult for people to get things done in Harrisburg at times. But I don't want to belabor that too much because I think the size of the legislature is critically important. You see, we get a lot of representation in the rural areas of Blair County because we have someone who represents primarily the rural areas of Blair County. But I learned something when I started campaigning for this race. You see, I had several thousand doors that I needed to knock on. And what I learned was I couldn't go to the rural areas and knock on every door that I had to travel half a mile in between each one. So what did I do? I went to the densely populated areas and I started talking to those people. So, it stands to reason that if we have a city of Altoona and the rural areas of Blair County in the same district, it's probably going to be easier for the city people to get their voices heard. And in that situation, I think the rural people miss out. I like the number of people that we have in the House. I think it helps our voices to be heard. But we need to reduce the cost of those people.
Our next question goes to Judy Ward. What innovative ways would you believe would help to deal with the opioid crisis?
As I said before, we have a lot of people in our communities that are hurting. And that, it breaks my heart that we might lose one more person to opioids and to drugs. I think there's a lot we can do, and I've noticed a correlation between areas that don't have jobs and their opioid issues and the areas that do have jobs. And I think some of it is economic. It's having something, some hope. It's having hope and having a job. But I also believe that there are some creative things, and legislatively we've done a lot of things. We've tackled a lot of the low-hanging fruit with mapping program for the pharmaceuticals, so physicians can look on there when they're prescribing and know if they've gotten opioid prescriptions other places. We've done things with trying to educate students, trying to educate professionals on prescribing. We've had so many opioid bills, and I think it's been good. It's been very good. But I think we also have to get creative and maybe have tax credits for folks who are going into counseling because we don't have enough counselors to help everybody. Thank you.
The funny thing about opioids is that they don't care how much money you make, they don't care where you live, they don't care who you know. It affects everyone across all avenues of society. So how do we fix it? Well, right now Harrisburg's trying to throw more money at it, like they do every other problem. Let's just throw some money and hope it goes away on its own. Well, that's not going to work. Because you go around our communities and just throwing money at people never works. And it's not going to work to get people off of heroin. So how do you fix it? Get back into schools. Start educating kids again about what this stuff does to people. I worked in the district attorney's office and I worked in private practice. And I can assure you, Mr. Gorman behind me would love the chance to get back into schools again and show kids, 7th and 8th graders, 9th, 10th graders, what heroin does to you. He'd love to show you the pictures from PennDOT, what we call JNet in the legal world, of what someone looks like before they started using heroin and what they look like 6 months, a year later. He would love to bring in addicts and have them tell their stories to kids and show them what this stuff actually does to you. That hasn't been happening. I know he'd like to do that because we've talked about that. And I know the folks in the Blair County District Attorney's Office would love to do that too. I know our local police would love to do that. That's where it starts. Rather than money, get kids educated about what this junk does to you, and then we can have a chance at working backwards from there. Thank you.
This is an exceedingly complex issue. There's legal aspects, there's emotional aspects, there's spiritual aspects, there's economic aspects. And each one of these things feeds into the addiction problem. And I think each one of them needs to be addressed. I love the idea of the education. Clearly, we need to find ways to get this information to our kids. But it's not just kids that are falling prey to this. And we find that the people that tend to be most likely to fall into these kinds of things are in the midst of other problems, other issues, mental health problems, economic problems, cultural issues within our society, where we've disengaged people from one another. I saw an amazing study that was done with rats and heroin. If you put them in an isolated booth, they'll kill themselves with drugs. If you put them with other rats, I know rats aren't people, but if you give them everything that rats need to grow and thrive and survive, they don't have a tendency to self-medicate themselves to death. I think we've become detached from each other as a culture. I think that's one of the things that we need to find out what is at the root of that and figure out how to do that. Unity is the core of that. We've become so divided as a nation, as a commonwealth, as a people. We need to figure out what's causing that. And as a last thing, I would like to also mention that, I'm not going to. All right,
As I've been going door to door around the district and I've been engaging with people in this community, I can tell you that the subject that comes up as much as anyone is to please go down to Harrisburg Gym and tell your story that will make a difference for this issue in the state of Pennsylvania. And they ask me that because I talk about my story with them, and I tell them that I lost a brother to a drug addiction 30 years ago, so I know what it looks like. I live in long-term recovery, so I know what that looks like. And I have surrounded myself with people who deal with this issue on a daily basis, and I'm looking at them right now. I look at a pharmacist like Pete Kreckle, and I look at a nurse practitioner like Lynn Thompson. I look at a doctor like John Reinhardt, and George Palmer, Independent Center for Living. And I know that there are people in this community that can make a difference with this issue. And I'm telling you that for me, if you don't go down to Harrisburg with one issue that you can make a difference in, then you shouldn't go down. This is my #1 passionate issue that I think I can make a difference in, and I'm surrounding myself with the people that have the ideas to get it done. We need to be able to put together a peer review group of physicians in each region of the state of Pennsylvania so the physicians know where they are on the prescription line when it comes to who they're prescribing to. There are people who are being overprescribed. It's just as bad for those who are being underprescribed. We can't afford to have it happen for either one. We need to be able to force physicians to use the PDMP so that it has teeth. That's the Physician Drug Monitoring Program, so that when we're prescribing opiates to addicts, that we know who we're giving them to. And that's just why I could go on for 10 minutes about this, but I want you to know I'm passionate about this one, and I will make a difference in Harrisburg with this issue.
This is going to be our last question, and the question, I believe, will go first to Dan Kiss, and after that we'll have 3-minute closing statements from all the candidates. How will you address the pension crisis?
Probably the biggest economic issue facing our state is the pension crisis. And that bill's coming due very, 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 very soon if we don't do something about it. What do we know? We know Harrisburg is exceedingly poor at investing our money. They get about a 1.5% to 2% return rate per year on the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that they're investing. And what are we getting for it? Nothing. We're paying tens of millions of dollars to those people to invest it. We're losing money on that investment. It's coming due very, very soon, and we don't have the money for it. So how do we fix it? We took a very, very small baby step a couple years ago, I think it was last year actually, when we allowed the possibility of the 401k system. But wait, we're still going to let you have the defined benefit system too. So we didn't really take much of a step. We just kind of said, well, we're going to try here. We need to do more. We need to go back in time and allow people who are in the defined benefit system to go to a 401k. I have 2 brothers who are school teachers who are probably never going to see a dime of that pension money because they've only been in the program 2 or 3 years. They're begging me to have the chance to go and re-enroll into a 401k so they can make their own money because they don't trust Harrisburg to do it. There's nothing that says we can't do that. That's where we start. Give people the chance to opt out and make it a 401k going forward. Thank you. Chris Freeman?
I'd like to just take about 5 seconds and say the last thing that I forgot. We need to empower faith-based and private organizations to be involved in that opioid problem too. I think we don't allow those organizations to be as engaged with that as they should. So, the pension program. Well, first of all, we need to stop the bleeding. We need to make sure that new people coming in are put on a defined contribution program instead of a defined benefit program. We need to catch up those funds as quickly as possible. The longer we kick that can down the road, the worse the bill coming due is going to be. And the truth is, we cannot cut our way to fixing this. Unless we grow the economy, it's irrelevant, just absolutely irrelevant. So we need to stop the bleeding, we need to get on a program that's sustainable, and then we need to grow the economy like we never have before so that we can actually pay that bill. And it's exactly what we do if we were in a problem like this at home, right? We'd stop paying the bill that we had, or we'd stop the service so we didn't have a bigger bill. We'd figure out what we owed, we'd put everything we could toward it, and then we'd figure out how we make more money until we can get it down. And that's the only way that we can do it in Harrisburg as well.
Well, once again, when you talk about crises in Pennsylvania, we have an addiction problem. We are addicted to the word crisis, dairy crisis, opiate crisis. We're creating another crisis with gambling. We're going to use gambling to help pay for the opiate crisis. This state is so far backwards, it's mind-boggling. When it comes to the pension crisis, you don't hear any answers because nobody's gotten serious about it yet. Until somebody's going to get serious about it, we're not going to see any change. So, I applaud John McGinnis. John McGinnis was very much like I was just now, talking about that one issue that you go to Harrisburg that you think you can make a difference with. Representative John McGinnis went to Harrisburg as an economist for Penn State Altoona. He is an expert on what you can do to help fix the pension crisis in Pennsylvania. They listened to him for a little while until they realized that they did not want to get serious about what he thought would make a difference with the pension crisis. In fact, when they finally came out with the legislation where new employees are making a contribution, he didn't even vote for it because he was disgusted by it, that it wasn't what he thought was going to be the best for Pennsylvania. So until we get serious about the pension crisis, I'm just going to continue to hear people talk about it. I'll go to Harrisburg and I'll fight for it. I will. But I'm just not sensing that anybody's serious about it. To me, it's probably the second most serious crisis we have in the state of Pennsylvania, behind the opiate addiction crisis. But we have to make sure that we're going to get serious about it. Until we do, we're just going to keep living with what we got. Thank you.
Last year, we did change the pension plan moving forward. There are two types of hybrid programs that new employees will be able to get into, and there's also a defined contribution or the 401k type program. It wasn't everything we wanted, but it was the only thing the governor would sign. So half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. We've made some change, and it was historic change. We need to continue. We need to look at those investment fees that we pay. We need to also pay the bill. We need to, and we are serious about it, but as with many things in Harrisburg, there's many different ideas, and it's hard to decide. It's hard to come together and coalesce, even as a Republican caucus. But we also do need to grow our economy, and that's why it's so important that we are strong economically as a state and that we support business. I would like to see us get out of the liquor business, sell off our liquor stores, and use that money to put in to our pension deficit, because we do have to start paying the bills. Our budgets have been adding more dollars into that, but it's like a giant monster. It just keeps growing and growing, so thank you.
Dan Kiss?
I went first.
Oh, you did? Okay.
You give me an extra minute and a half, I'll take it.
No. I appreciate your honesty. Okay, we're going to go to closing arguments, closing statements, and Chris Creek will be on the first.